Hello everybody, it's Shrouded Hand here. I've done a few videos looking at strange art on this channel and they always seem to do well, so I thought I'd do another one. As usual, I'm going to pick a cheerful subject. This time it's people who have suffered from horrific trauma. A lot of what I'm going to show in this video is little more than amateurish doodles, but it's the trauma that the artist went through that gives the drawings their significance. These are drawings of events where there was no camera to bear witness, images that have burnt themselves into the mind of the victim. In creating these artworks, they relived those moments in detail, and it allows us a glimpse into the painful memories that still haunt them. I'll start with some drawings from people who have escaped from North Korea. A lifetime of living in a socialist hellhole has left deep scars on the minds of North Korea's citizens, and those that manage to get away have harrowing tales to tell. The worst stories come from the prison camps. Life in these camps is a daily grind of forced labour, starvation and physical punishment. Kwon Hyo-jin was imprisoned in the Chonggori re-education camp for 8 years after he was caught helping defectors get from North Korea to China. After his escape, he used his artistic talents to draw his and other people's experiences in the camps. His drawings tell a harrowing tale of the effects of starvation. The prisoners exist on a handful of rice each day, if they're lucky. Very quickly on this diet, they end up looking like walking skeletons. In order to survive, they have to catch things like rats and snakes. They have to eat them raw in the field because if the guards catch them with any unauthorized food, then they're punished. Many of them catch diseases from the uncooked vermin that they consume. Despite the mass starvation and many of the prisoners being disabled or injured, they're still forced to do hard labour. Any that are too weak are severely beaten and have their food rations cut. Stress positions are a common punishment. Prisoners are forced to stand in extremely painful positions for hours at a time. One report I found says that a glass is placed under the prisoner while they stand in these stress positions, and they have to stay there until the glass is filled with their own sweat. It usually takes about 10 hours for the glass to fill. The torture depicted here is known as the pigeon punishment. Prisoners are tied to a low bar with their hands behind their back. In this position they can't sit down or stand up. They would be left in this state for 3 days or more. These pictures from other unnamed escapees tell a very similar story of brutality and starvation. This drawing shows a prisoner eating corn from cow dung. As punishment, he was forced to stand on his head and was kicked in the stomach until he vomited. Pregnant women in the camps were often singled out for abuse. In this picture, a woman undergoes the clock punishments. A prison guard shouts out a time and the woman has to recreate the position of the clock's hands using her body. She's made to do this until she collapses from exhaustion. This picture depicts a forced abortion technique. A wooden plank is laid across a woman's belly, and other prisoners are forced to jump up and down on either end. In this drawing, a woman is tied to a tree, about to have her fetus cut out of her body as the other prison guards point and laugh. Prisoners were often tortured purely for the amusement of the guards, as in this drawing, showing a man who is tied to a post and being kicked in the face by a guard wanting to let off steam. Prisoners in these camps were brainwashed to think of themselves as subhuman. Their lives were worth less than the cattle in the fields. Uniformity of thought and action was all that was required. Their only purpose in life was to respond to the orders of the guards, and I think this comes out in the art. Common among the drawings is the dehumanization of the depicted prisoners. The eyes are drawn as empty hollows, they're shaven-headed and slack-jawed, as if constantly moaning in pain. They all look exactly the same, there's no real way to distinguish between the individual prisoners. The guards, on the other hand, are drawn much more human-looking. They have a lot more animation and personality. Notice how the guards' mouths are wide open in most of these drawings, screaming endless demands at the prisoners. In some pictures, the guards' mouths are bigger than anything else in the drawing. In the re-education camps, following a guard's orders was a matter of life and death. Their orders became your entire world. These pictures appeared in 2018 and showed detainees in a Yemeni prison being severely abused. The drawings were smuggled out of the prison along with the testimonies of 9 people who experienced the abuse firsthand. These prisoners, suspected of being members of Al-Qaeda, were subjected to a regular pattern of punishment. Sexual abuse was the most common way of forcing confessions and getting prisoners to comply. As one detainee reported, "They strip you naked, then tie your hands to a steel pole from right and left so you are spread open in front of them. Then the sodomizing starts." They would often film these assaults to further humiliate the prisoners. Sometimes they would apply electric shocks to the genitals or hang heavy weights from their testicles. The most disturbing thing I find about these drawings is that the artist hasn't survived the abuse and escaped to tell their tale. They were drawn by someone still imprisoned and still experiencing it on a daily basis. These drawings are a desperate plea for help. The pictures are drawn on small pieces of polystyrene dinner plates, produced at great risk to the artist and concealed from the guards until they could be handed to someone who could help. Notice the cartoonishly large arms and bodies of the guards in some of these drawings. I think if you can infer anything about the mental state of the artist from these pictures, it would be the feeling of sheer helplessness and the overwhelming power of the captors. Abu Zubaydah was arrested in Pakistan in 2002 during the War on Terror. He is currently being held at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, but before that he was detained at CIA black sites in Poland and Thailand. Here he was subjected to what is euphemistically known as enhanced interrogation techniques. Recently a number of declassified documents have emerged showing Abu Zubaydah's drawings. They depict his time at the Thailand black sites being tortured by CIA operatives. For months he was kept naked, sleep deprived and shackled in a position where he couldn't straighten his back. The room he was in was kept at a constantly cold temperature. He was endlessly blasted with loud music and periodically doused with cold water. Some months into his captivity they took him out of his cell and forced him into a coffin-like box for days on end. The box would be covered with a heavy sheet to make it difficult for him to breathe. Sometimes he would be taken out of this box and put into a much smaller box, a torture known as cramped confinement. In his testimony he writes about what it's like to be in this punishment crate. He says, "As soon as they locked me up inside the box, I tried my best to sit up, but in vain, for the box was too short. I tried to take a curled position, but to no avail. It was too tight. I felt I was going to explode from bending my legs and my back, and from being unable to spread them, not even for short instants. The very strong pain made me scream unconsciously. The contractions in my muscles and nerves were increasing with every hour, every minute and every second that were passing by. Especially in the wounds I already had in my belly and thigh, the pain was unbearable. I was hunched over in a contorted way. My back and knees were in excruciating pain. I began slamming my body and shackled arms against the inside and screaming for help and tried to break the door. The wound in my stomach and leg opened up and I started bleeding, yet I didn't care. I would do anything to stretch my leg and back for 1 minute. Among other tortures, he was also waterboarded multiple times, had his head smashed against the concrete wall and was shackled in a position where he could only stand on his tiptoes. Looking at these drawings now, I'm struck by the similarity between Abu Zubaydah's work and the art of the schizophrenics that I've looked at in previous videos. Notice the waves of influence often present in schizophrenics' work, not just used to show blasts of cold air or loud music, but also emanating from the bugs that they would throw into his cell to torment him. Notice the all-pervading cameras in this drawing, circled in red by the artist himself to highlight the sensation of constantly being watched. In this picture he draws multiple versions of himself being tortured in various ways inside the same cell. Now, I'm not trying to imply that Abu Zubaydah was schizophrenic. Unlike the delusions of a person in the grip of a paranoid psychosis, these things actually were really happening to him. But I think it does show the psychological scars of this enhanced interrogation and how it can mirror schizophrenic symptoms. When you read through his testimony, it's the mental torment he describes that's more disturbing than the physical pain. He writes, "I was deprived from sleep for a long period of time. I don't even know how long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, or even more. It felt like an eternity, to the point where I found myself falling asleep despite the water being thrown at me by a guard. He found himself with no choice but to strongly and constantly shake me in order to keep me awake. I couldn't even sleep for a short second. Then I got used to the shaking, just as I'd got used to the water being thrown at me, so I was able to sleep for a second. They started coming into the cell and standing me up on my feet for a few instants, then putting me into the chair to prevent me from sleeping. I even found myself during interrogation sessions falling asleep, maybe for 2 or 3 seconds. I just wanted to sleep for one more beautiful second before they realised I was sleeping. I would sleep for 1 second, then wake up for another second, and then I would sleep again, and then I would wake up again. They stood me up, I slept again. They walked me round the cell, I slept while they dragged me. A doctor came in and gave me the injection, and I woke up from the pain. He examined me and then he started making signals to them without saying anything, as if he was trying to tell them he needs sleep or he will go crazy. After about 5 days without sleep, a person starts to exhibit behaviours similar to someone with acute psychosis. Delirium, hallucinations, paranoia, disordered thoughts. These effects get worse the longer they're kept awake. In most cases, allowing them to sleep will remove these symptoms, but in some people the mental problems can persist for a long time afterwards. Sound was also used to affect his mental state. A noise-generating machine was used to create a deafening thudding noise 24 hours a day. Then one day they switched to playing music. He writes, "After one day I became confident that the music was not a good sign, but rather a sign of disaster approaching. As soon as the very loud music started, and as soon as the very disturbing singing started along with the loud noise, I started feeling pain in my ears. I felt my brain was going up and down and left and right. The singing consisted of one single song that would end with one loud, long scream. The song would last 5 to 10 minutes and was played again and again non-stop, to the point that on the first day I became afraid to reach the moment where the song would end, for the end sounded like screaming. I started trying to distract my mind in order to avoid feeling the end of the song coming, and finally I found myself screaming along with it. As soon as the song would end with this long screaming, I would scream myself. Abu Zubaydah was one of the first people to be subjected to this enhanced interrogation, and in retrospect he believed that he was being used by the CIA as a guinea pig to test out which techniques would break a man the quickest. Although he's no longer subjected to these interrogation methods, he still remains a prisoner at Camp 7 in Guantanamo Bay. How much of the psychological damage persists to this day is unknown, but in his writing he still talks of finding it difficult to arrange his thoughts properly and being plagued by persistent nightmares when he tries to sleep. A lot of his testimony is still classified, including whatever happened to him at the black site in Poland, so it's possible that more drawings might come to light in the future. Although these pictures depict horrific abuse, it's the little details that I find more disturbing. Things like the constant sweat pouring off the prisoners' bodies as they're being tortured, or the contracting muscles in the calves as they're forced to stand on tiptoe, the uncontrolled shaking of their hands and feet as they're being waterboarded. It's easy for us to imagine all kinds of horrible torments, but it's these small details that only someone who's actually gone through it will know about. Small details that stuck in their mind enough to depict later on. And one thing I've got to admire about the artists is their willingness to confront their trauma head on, reliving their most horrifying moments just to show the world what had happened to them. It makes these drawings seem like the ultimate confrontation with reality, something which most professional artists never achieve. Okay, so I'm going to end the video here, but I'm going to call this part 1 because I had a whole lot more art to look at, and so I'm going to save that for another video. In part 2 we'll be looking at some stuff that's possibly even more disturbing than what I've shown here today, so you've got that to look forward to, I guess. Thank you to everyone who's been supporting my work on Patreon and PayPal. It's highly appreciated. I hope you all found this video interesting. It's nice to get back to doing some more art related stuff. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in part 2. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.